The Guardians are consistently one of the youngest teams in the majors, and they need some of those young players to take a step forward in 2026. I'll tell you why Joey Cantillo is one of those players to watch.
Tanner Bobby the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Guardians fans? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Guardians. Happy that you chose to spend the next half hour with us talking about Guardians baseball in the middle of January, the month that seems like it's never going to end. Not to mention, there's not a lot of baseball news, at least regarding the Guardians, although they did sign a former first-round pick on Tuesday. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but this is Locked On Guardians, the only daily podcast that covers your Cleveland Guardians every single day from the majors, the minors, the draft, and everything in between. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network, thanks to you. I am Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts for the last 4 years and counting. My friend and co-host Jeff Ellis, who is off on this episode, and I'm coming up on my 19th year covering the Guardians farm system as a prospect writer and editor. And also, shout out to all the Everydayers, shout out to the commenters, the insiders, everybody in the Everydayer Club. Appreciate all of you and your support, especially this time of year when there's just not a lot going on baseball-wise. We don't have Guards Fest, we don't have major signings, we don't have trades. It's brutal. It's brutal. So if you're talking Guardians baseball with us right now in the doldrums, you are the reason we show up and we enjoy it. And I love talking Guardians baseball with all of you. So thank you for making today's episode and every episode your first listen today and every day wherever you get podcasts as well. On today's show, we are going to get into why the Guardians aren't fighting a former first-round pick to spring training this year. I'll dive into what traits and tools that I think are the most important when evaluating prospects. And we're leading off today's episode focusing on what we learned about the 2025 graduated prospects and what they can do in 2026 for the Guardians. Today's episode of Locked On Guardians brought to you by FanDuel. The division round is now here. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Visit FanDuel.com, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So the Guardians graduated 4 players from prospect status in 2025. We saw more rookies than that, but only 4 of them graduated. And what it takes to graduate by MLB rookie standards is this. So it's 130 at-bats for hitters, 50 innings for pitchers, or 45 days on the active roster. So that's a 26-man roster. That is the 10-day IL for pitchers, hitters, 15-day IL for pitchers, or the 60-day major league injured list, the major league, not the minor league. So you got to be on the 40, and you got to be on the major league disabled list or injured list, I should say, to have those days count for you. So I think the player, just due to virtue of playing time in his role, that we learn about the most in 2025 that can have the biggest impact on the 2026 roster is Joey Cantillo. And I've liked Cantillo for a long time. I was extremely excited about the Guardians acquiring him in 2020 in the Mike Clevenger deal. I went back and looked at that and I was like, okay, Arias, Cantillo, Naylor. I was excited about all those guys, to be honest with you. I thought it was a really fun trade, and they got, plenty out of it. Quantrill was solid for a little bit there. Arias has provided defense and some moments as a hitter. Hedges obviously has been a big factor here, and we were waiting on Cantillo to be that guy, I think, as part of that trade. And I liked him when he was with Fort Wayne in the Midwest League in 2019. So what I've always liked about Cantillo is his changeup. He's a Vulcan changeup. I've always liked that pitch. It's always been his best pitch. And that was a great pitch for him in 2025, as it always has been for him, but he always needed the ability to set it up. He always needed to be able to throw. He can throw it a couple times in a count. He can double up on. He can throw it to righties and lefties, which is great. But, you need more than one pitch as a starter or reliever in Major League Baseball. Not everyone's Mariano Rivera. In 2026, the curveball for him, I think, emerged as a real secondary weapon. The curveball for him last year, he threw it as his third most used pitch. He ditched the slider a little bit, 18% of the time, and hitters hit 234 against it with a 250 slugging percentage, and it ran a whiff rate of 24%. So his overall whiff rate last year was 29%, which was 80th percentile in Major League Baseball among pitchers. So his curveball was pretty up there in terms of percentile whiff rate overall, although I'm sure for individual pitches it probably isn't as high as some. But his changeup ran a 50% whiff rate, 49.4 if we're being literal. So I guess 49 if we're gonna move it down. So he now has two secondaries that are legitimate swing and miss pitches for him that he can throw for strikes and miss the barrel. And that's the other thing I was really excited about Joey Cantillo in 2025. To me, this is the most interesting data point from him last year. He was only in the second percentile in chase rate, 22%. So he did not get a lot of hitters to chase out of the zone against his stuff, which normally, you'd like to see that happen more often. But his whiff rate was almost 30%, 29.7. So I could round that one up, right? Strikeout rate, 26.9. We can round up to 27. 80th and 79th percentile in baseball in those two areas. So this is a guy who was getting strikeouts and missing bats without needing guys to fish out of the zone. That's a really good sign. If you're getting that much in-zone whiff on your stuff, that's a really good sign. Obviously, like getting the chase, the other thing he's got to figure out is his walk rate, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The other thing that was really fun last year was barrel rate. He was in the 67th percentile in barrel rate, so only 7.2% barrels, and that's the best combination of exit velocity and launch angle. So the ideal bat off the ball off the bat, I should say. So he's able to stay off the barrel and get whiffs in the zone without needing chases. That's a good sign, in my opinion, from Cantillo. So I'm really excited for him on that. Avoids a lot of loud contact, got guys to chase without whiffing, and it was the healthiest season he's ever had. 116 innings between AAA and the majors, and he still has incredible extension. He had 99th percentile extension, so 7.4 feet of extension is just incredible because he's very lanky, always has been. And his fastball is solid. It had a 16-inch ride on it, so inches of vertical break, which means it's reducing against gravity, 16 inches. It's not going down as much. 20 is really good, so 16 is not bad. Despite the extension and the induced vertical break on his fastball that are really good, his fastball didn't play up. It was pretty bad last year. It got hit hard. It was his worst pitch. And the velocity wasn't where it had been. So that's something he does need to work on. He was up to 92 in September, 93, but that was on a 6-man rotation. So I don't know, is he going to keep that up? I don't really know. I know I've seen this offseason him talking about working on his velocity this offseason to get it back to where it was. Because I've seen him hit 95, 96, 97 in the past in shorter stints. Can he get that to 94 consistently? Because if he can, I think it's a big deal. Health and control have always been his biggest issues. He's had shoulder injuries, abdominal injuries, hamstring injuries. This is a guy who barely had thrown 100 innings until last year in a season. He hadn't thrown 100 innings since 2019. So, previous injury is the best predictor of future injury, especially when it comes to pitching. So those are the two issues for him. Walks have always been a problem for him too. Although it wasn't that way in 2019 before he got here, but now it seems to have gone that way. So those are always things that are going to be red flags in him, and I think that's what's going to hold him back ceiling wise. Down the stretch in the final 7-8 starts, he had 2 walks or less in 7 of those final 8, and 2 of those starts he had no walks. So that was a good sign. You wonder if, the 6-man rotation in September also helped that too. But if he can stay healthy, keep the walks in check like he did in September, add a little bit of velocity, I think what we have from Joey Cantillo here is a legitimate number 3 starter. He's got to stay healthy, and I think he's, he may always be prone to certain injuries, and he probably is always going to have issues with walks. I don't think we're ever going to see this guy have an immaculate walk rate or have Shane Bieber-like control and command, but he's going to flash as a 3 a lot of times, a really solid 3. Now, the Guardians don't have like a real, true ace, so they need more of those guys to emerge, but Cantillo, I think, is legitimately a mid-rotation starter. What we saw from him last year, all those things I talked about, I think that makes him a legitimate mid-rotation starter if he's healthy. Now, obviously, the hitters will adjust. He'll have to adjust back. That's always the biggest issue, but he should have a spot in the rotation in 2026 without question, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. I've always liked him And I think we started to see what we'd always liked about Joey Cantillo in 2025 when he got into the rotation full time. All right, we've got more graduated prospects to talk about. CJ Kayfus, Eric Sabrowski, Jonathan Rodriguez. We got to talk about stats, traits, and tools that I like that I evaluate prospects for. And later on the show, we got to talk about the first round pick the Guardians are inviting to spring training. The NFL wildcard round has come and gone. It was a wild one. FanDuel is officially in playoff mode as we head to the division round. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers like you even more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for you inside the app. Each game day, you're going to see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply on the bets that you like the most. So you can open it up and see what boost you want to apply, and it's going to give you a little extra juice on the bets you already like and not forcing you to bet on something new so you can really go full steam ahead with what you like. Got 1.5 points going to the Broncos and the Bills. That should be an interesting matchup. Looks like any team in the NFL this year could win the Super Bowl in terms of the playoffs. I think it's anybody's match really out there. As for baseball, Guardians plus 300 to win the AL Central. The Royals plus 200, the Tigers plus 155. It's anybody's Central at this point. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We know if you're here, you're already living your team, your Cleveland Guardians every day. Take it up a level. Go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club. Get Locked On Guardians with no interruptions. Members-only Discord access, where we're talking about a lot of things in the Discord on Tuesday evening, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonguardians.supercast.com. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. So we're talking about graduated prospects from the Guardians 2025 class. Now, I know we saw guys like Valera, DeLauder, Messick all had played big roles for them down the stretch, and in the playoffs, we'll talk. They're not graduated. Those guys are still going to be prospects and rookies in 2026. These are guys who are no longer rookie eligible. So we talked about Joey Cantillo and why I think we saw a breakout from him last year, and I think if he's healthy, he'll be a big piece of this 2026 team. What we thought he could be all along. The next guy I want to talk about is CJ Kayfus a little bit. Where I had him, I'll just kind of go through too how I had these guys ranked their final year of prospect eligibility. So Cantillo finished his prospect eligibility for me, the number 7 overall prospect in the rotation. Last spring, I wrote about him heading into the season. He was a 50 overall in the 20 to 80 scouting scale, where 80 is like, Pedro Martinez and 20 is, a guy you don't ever want to see pitch in the majors. I said mid to back end rotation arm, depending on control health. So I feel like I nailed that one pretty good. CJ Kayfus, I ranked him 10th overall coming into last season, and I had him at a 45 out of that 80 scouting scale, where again, 80 is like Aaron Judge and 20 is Will Wilson. I don't know, maybe. I said fringe regular first baseman that could flirt with 20 home run range and a solid on base percentage. So what did we learn about CJ Kayfus in 2025? Well, it's a guy who had really strong but not great exit velocities in AAA. They were good, but they weren't great. They could be better, and those did not translate to the majors for him. And the thing that I think I was most concerned about for him was the fact that he had a higher chase rate than I would have guessed. It's the guy I thought was going to have a little more higher batting average, was going to be a guy who made more contact, and his strikeout rates were not great. So in the minors, his exit velocities were, the max was 110, 90th percentile outcome was 104.5, which was in the 71st percentile. But he barreled the ball. He had an 84% hard hit rate. So the batted ball data in AAA was really good. When he got to the majors, the best he could do was a 36% hard hit rate, and the average exit velo was only 88.9 compared to 89. So it was down a little bit, but that's good in AAA. It's not great in the majors. The chase rate to me was the biggest concern. 27% chase rate in the minors this past year, 29% in majors. Didn't go up a ton, which is good, but it's not in a good spot, really. Doesn't draw a ton of walks. Again, didn't hit the ball all that hard. So I think those are things you want to be careful about. He had a hard time against good velocity. 94 and above, he really struggled. Had a hard time with breaking stuff too. So, fastballs below 90, he was crushing. Breaking stuff made it hard. The one thing Kayfus did really well, which is why I said he's a guy who could hit 20 home runs and makes him a fringe corner player, is the fact that he pulls the ball in the air. Some of the best things that he does, which the Guardians like, was he put the ball in the air to his pull side 19.5% of the time, which is in the red. So that's a pretty strong statistic for him. He did 21% of the time in AAA. So that's something he was consistent about. So that's a good sign. And that's pretty much what his entire profile is going to rely on. How often can he pull the ball in the air? That's going to be something he's really has to do. I think if he gets his exit velocities from the minors a little up, like what he had in the minors, I think that'll help him. He'll probably chase a little bit too much to me. Has a hole in his swing at the top of the zone because he loves that ball, middle in, low in. I think that's going to be an issue for him. He does chase and whiff low too, which is ironic because that's where he actually likes the ball, but he is willing to expand the zone too often there. He's got a decent arm, but he's never going to be a great right fielder. He's definitely a first baseman. And I will say he had an 847 OPS against lefties in AAA last year, but was not good in the majors. So I think he needs to figure out other issues like chasing a little bit less and overall just improving pitch selection. I think he should get an opportunity against lefties at some point, but it's going to be fringe power. Again, you want 20 home run power with 270 average and going to be a high 700s OPS guy. That's not really ideal for a first baseman corner outfield bat, especially when he doesn't provide great defense in the outfield, but it's fringy. So I kind of compared him like a Lonnie Chisenhall with more strikeouts, a little bit less athleticism in the outfield. Let's talk very quickly about Eric Sabrowski and Jonathan Rodriguez, two of the other guys in this list. So Sabrowski is essentially the reliever version of Cantillo, older, but he's had health issues and control issues in the past. 2 Tommy Johns, a forearm issue last year. Also got whiffs, now getting chases out of the zone. So this is the guy who gets a ton of in-zone whiffs. That's a great thing. Even better vertical break on his fastball, 19 inches, so better than Cantillo. Stuff Plus models loved his fastball and curveball. Slider had good results in 2025. Stuff Plus didn't like that pitch as much as his curve. I like the curve better, but maybe that means he's got 3 good pitches now he can use. Also excels with extensions. That makes everything play up a little bit. Probably ends up being a left-handed reliever specialist who faces lefties, who's going to have health and control issues, but a really solid left-handed option in the pen that you would want to have going forward. I ranked Sabrowski 24th last year, and I gave him a 40 on the 2080 scouting scale. I said quality stuff, control issues, middle relief depth. So I feel pretty good about that. The last guy I'll talk about is the guy I ranked 25th. That's Jonathan Rodriguez. I gave him a 40 out of 80. And I said he'll have power, very low OBP, corner outfielder, DH. And I think I might have been shooting high on 40, to be honest with you. Look, I'm going to be honest here. I know Rodriguez didn't get the most traditional shot in right field last year, or DH, right? It was a very bumpy ride for him. He was up in April, went back down, came up in June, went back down, came up in September. So very, stop and start for him in terms of what his exposure was in the majors in a very limited, brief role. But bottom line for Rodriguez, the same thing I saw in AAA. I don't think this is a major league approach. His swing rate overall, how often he swings, is below league average. So he is a little bit passive as a hitter, but he also has a poor chase rate, which to me says it's a bad approach. You can't be a passive hitter and also chase out of the zone. You have to have better pitch selection than that. So he doesn't have breaking stuff well. He doesn't have speed. He doesn't have good range. He doesn't even put the ball in the air like CJ Kayfus. He doesn't pull the ball in the air. It's very poor. He's got high ground ball rate. So a guy who's got great exit velocities, hits the ball hard, has bat speed, which is why he hit the fastball, but he doesn't know how to adjust the breaking stuff, and he just has poor pitch selection. Can't get the ball in the air. So if you have all those exit velocities that are really good, if you can't hit it in the air, it doesn't matter. If you're going to keep hitting ground balls, it does not matter. And that's also a pitch selection issue too. If you're not identifying the kind of pitches that you can pull, like Jose Ramirez learned to do all those years ago. He did hit lefties very well in AAA, I will say. That's the one redeeming thing. So maybe there's a chance for a limited role there. But again, he is a poor defender with a poor approach. I don't think he's even as good as Oscar Gonzalez was, because at least Oscar Gonzalez made a lot of contact, was a good bad ball hitter at times, where Rodriguez, I think, doesn't have good pitch selection at all. So I think I'd probably downgrade him to an up and down guy, and I don't even know if I would keep him on the 40-man roster going forward. All right, I'll talk a little bit about the tools, the data, the traits I just talked about, and why I think they're important to evaluating prospects. And then we will get to that former first-round pick that the Guardians are inviting to spring training this year. Keep up with all things Guardians for this final month of the offseason, even though we're going to spring training. No matter what's going on. We didn't do a reaction video to the first-round pick the Guardians signed, Carter Kieboom, who we'll talk about, but we're going to talk about him here. But if you want to get notifications of when this episode goes live on YouTube, when we do reaction videos, when we post clips from the show, anything else that's going on, hit the bell on YouTube. You'll get a notification sent straight to your phone notifying you of that. And if you auto-download on all your audio platforms, we're free wherever you get podcasts. You keep the show in your feed no matter what you're doing. You can always catch up on the news, analysis, all that fun stuff, and talk baseball with us no matter what time of day it is, 5 days a week, which will be coming back, here in about 2 weeks, which is crazy. So we're already hitting that time. Also, if you want more news than that, join the Insiders Club. We text with the community daily. We drop news, rumors when those happen. We ask for mailbag questions, do monthly video chats. Join subtext.com/LockedOnGuardians for that. All right, let's talk a little bit about data points and traits, tools that I value when it comes to evaluating prospects. And spoiler alert is that you heard me talk a lot about them in the last segment when I was evaluating those graduated prospects. So, and this is something people have been asking us too, is, Jeff and I are both big into prospects, and how do we rank them, and, what do we look for? For hitters, to me, if you hear me rant about Rodriguez there, or I should say, it was ranting. Approach is most important. Pitch selection is a big deal. If you have a poor chase rate in the minors, that's not going to get better in the majors. If you're too aggressive of a hitter, that's not a good sign, like the Tyler Freemans, the Oscar Gonzalez's, or you have guys that are too passive, like a Nolan Jones. I learned with Will Brennan that walk rates don't translate from the minors. Not everyone's going to be perfect, so you have to adjust your expectations, accordingly. But you can't evaluate hitters on their minor league walk rate. You want to have them at a certain stable baseline. Like, you can't walk too little, like a Tyler Freeman or an Oscar Gonzalez, but you also can't walk too much, because then it just looks like you're passive, and that's not going to hold up in the majors for the most part. There are going to be outliers and all those things. Angel Henao, like, you also cannot just evaluate on data alone. You cannot scout the stat line. Angel Henao is a guy I watched a lot in Lake County, and I would say he has an aggressive approach that hasn't burned him yet in the minors, and I worry about it in the majors. He does have good at bats, but he is an aggressive hitter. So we'll see how that goes. Barrel adjustments. Can they get the barrel of the bat to the top of the zone, to the bottom of the zone? Is their barrel grooved into one area of the zone? You have to be able to match plane. And what that means is they got to be able to match the plane of the pitch. So you want the barrel to be on the same plane as the pitch. That's how they're going to get to power. I think platoon splits, I said that right? I think I got that backwards, an anagram. Platoon splits are a big thing. Now, if you have great platoon splits in the minors, doesn't mean that's going to translate to the majors, but if you have bad ones, it's probably not a good sign. Arm, I think, is important when it comes to defense, because that can overshadow a lot of defensive things. Oscar Gonzalez was not a great defender, but he had a great arm. Same with, Nolan Jones. Position spectrum, obviously, going from shortstop to catcher to center field to second to third to the corners. You want to make sure your prospects are playing up the middle. Those are going to be your best ones. Feel for the game. I think reading a pitcher's move as a base runner. As far as data, I look at Prospect Savant a lot. Fangraphs, Baseball Prospectus has deserve runs created plus, which is a good metric. And then BABIP is a really good one for hitters too. A higher BABIP in the minors Could mean good contact quality, could mean good speed, it could be a little bit of luck, but it could indicate things like good batted ball quality. I mentioned chase rate, zone contact, how much contact you make in the zone. If your strikeout rate doesn't match your swinging strike rate, which I mean this. So the general rule of thumb is that for a strikeout rate, it should be about double your swinging strike rate. So if you had an 8% swinging strike rate, ideally your strikeout rate as a hitter would be like 16%. And that can go in the error bars of 2%, 3%. But generally, that's what it should do. Anything higher probably says you're a little bit too passive. So that's what that is. Obviously, age to level is important. You don't want to be too old at lower levels. Health is always important. Character and work ethic. And then when I talk to coaches about players, they're never going to say anything bad about a player. So you've got to really listen to their tone and how they describe players. I remember a couple of years ago, I was asking the manager of the Captains at the time about Francisco Mejia. And the manager, said a few words, wasn't enthusiastic, didn't really elaborate on stuff, just answer the question. And then I remember talking about Martin Cervenka, who was not a prospect at all in pro ball, has been great over in some foreign leagues and will play in the World Baseball Classic again for the Dutch, I think, or I'm not sure where he's playing. I have to check, maybe. They ranted and raved about Martin Cervenka. And that had a lot to do with character and work ethic, I would say. So it was odd for them to say the greatest things and rant and rave about Cervenka, but have very little elaboration when it comes to Francisco Mejia. As far as pitchers, health is number one. I know Jeff always stuck with Daniel Espino in his rankings, but not George Valera, even though they both had health issues. I dropped them all due to health issues. That's a big one for pitchers, though. Velocity to me has to be like 94. That doesn't mean every pitcher who throws under 94 is not good, but that is about the major league average these days. So, if you're around 94 or above, that's more ideal, even though it can play down due to shape and extension and all those things. You need at least one good secondary, I think, no matter what it is. Whiff rate is important, how much you're missing bats. Walk rate obviously matters. You can't walk a ton of guys in the minors. Trait-wise, ease of operation. How violent is the delivery? How smooth is delivery? That's important. Size of a pitcher, the lack of Tristan McKenzie, you don't want that. The pitch mix overall, how it's going to play in the majors. Platoon splits matter for pitchers too. Same rule of thumb for strikeout rate. If your swinging strike rate is 10%, you want your strikeout rate to be like 20% within those same error bars. That's always important. Contact rate and chase rates. How often do hitters make contact? How often do they get them in chase? And then BABIP is batting average on balls in play, is also something to watch for pitchers. A lower one could be lucky, but it also could mean they don't give up a lot of hard contact either. If they give up a high one, it could be fluky, or it means they get hit hard. All right, let's finish today's show. Let me know what you think about my tools, stats, trades, all that kind of stuff. Let me know what you think about the graduated prospects as well that we went over. Let's talk about Carter Kieboom. I saw some people who, posted this in different areas. The Guardians signed him to a minor league deal with a camp invite to spring training. So who is Carter Kieboom? He is a former first-round pick of the Nationals in 2016, 28th overall high school pick. He will be 28 this year in the majors all year. And despite his name, he has been Carter Kiebus, not Carter Kieboom. He has a 64 WRC plus, again, where 100 is the average. So he is about 36% below league average for his career in 516 plate appearances, which is about a full season. So he's never had a full season in the majors in terms of at-bats. So there's that. He was supposed to have like a fringe hit tool, like 45, 50. Supposed to have about average power, 45 to 50. Was never a great runner. Was never a great defender, but had a good arm. This past year, chase rate wasn't great in the past. He's not chased out of the zone. And that's something the Guardians have been looking for from hitters, is guys who don't chase out of the zone, don't expand. But it wasn't good for him in 2025. So I don't know if that's necessarily sustainable. He's never made good contact. Like, he's always had below average contact rates. Always had poor contact quality. Never bought a guy who hit the ball hard. He is not a shortstop anymore, by the way. He's a third baseman, cannot play short. Maybe he can fill in, but this is not a guy you should expect to be playing shortstop. The one thing he did well in 2025 was he hit lefties really well. So there's a platoon element here, I suppose. The other thing I don't like, though, is that he hit 867 OPS at Salt Lake, AAA for the Angels, which is a very hitter-friendly ballpark. On the road this year, 735 OPS. So he did not do well outside of a very hitter-friendly environment. Really has a hard time with off-speed pitches, does not hit changeups, sliders, curveballs well, destroyed fastballs. So there's that. I've also heard, I don't want to say off-the-field issues, but I've heard that there's some non-playing issues that, maybe some slight character concerns. I can't really I can confirm I've heard that. I don't exactly know what they are, and it's secondhand information, but it comes from people that I trust. So I'm going to say that's been true. Doesn't mean it's going to still be true. Things could have changed for him. But really, the Guardians made the signing because they lack upper level infield depth, which is hard to say, right? It's mind blowing to say they don't have depth at the upper levels in the infield. You got Diane Frias, who's here on a non-roster invitation minor league deal. You got Brito, you got Bazzana. They don't have a AAA first baseman, right? They don't, Ralphie's going to start in AA. You've got maybe Kayfus goes to AAA, plays first. Dom Nunez is back. Maybe he plays first base. They don't have a lot there. Brito, I think Cairo's gone. They don't have a upper level third base, and Will Wilson's gone. They don't have a lot of depth up there in terms of infield, which is crazy to say. Hanau will be in AA. So they needed an upper level infielder who they could plug in the lineup. This is stuff they do all the time. They've had plenty of random names they've plugged in a AAA in the infield. None of them were former first-round picks except for Will Wilson, who, crushed AAA last year, came to the majors, and looked like one of the worst hitters in baseball, like Michael Martinez level. So always important to note. But, it's worth seeing if they can find something. He is a former first-round pick, was well-liked at one point. The traits, the data, they say it's probably not going to work. History does not support it, especially with how this organization develops hitters. So I don't really sit here and think this is a sign that's going to really move the needle. It really just looks like AAA depth at the most, and hoping for maybe some kind of miracle at best. All right, that'll wrap up today's show. Shout out to Todd F. for the most recent Apple podcast review. Appreciate that, Todd, who is also an insider. Would love more Apple podcast reviews. Helps grow the show, and would love to have more insiders. We'll do an insiders chat sometime at the end of the month. I'll get that going. I'll get that out there. Thank you for all tuning in today on Locked On Guardians. Jeff will be talking about the Guardians with you on Friday. I know we're about a month away from college baseball, so don't be surprised if on Friday Jeff is talking about the MLB draft a little bit. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Guardians so you get all the latest episodes. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Guardians. You get that ad-free, plus the members-only Discord access like I talked about. Head to Locked On Guardians, that's supercast.com, to join that club. We'll be back in your feeds on Friday, unless the Guardians make some kind of big move or news, which I'm sure they're going to do between now and then. Appreciate you all tuning in the meantime. Stay warm, have some fun, think good baseball thoughts. We're so close. Hope something big happens in the meantime. We'll see. And go Guardians, go. Kaboom. Kabust.